The Cannabis 101 podcast is presented by Stone Smiths.
Have you seen the Slash?
Made by users for users.
Engineered for flavor.
One of the coolest features around.
A built-in loading tool.
Learn more at www.stonesmiths.ca. What's happening? We'll tell you right now on This Week in Cannabis News.
My good friend David Wiley from the OZ joining me as usual on This Week in Cannabis News. You can follow them on Twitter at OkanaganZ and check them out online at okanaganz.com. David, I greet you and those watching with my view right now as I record this with you. A beautiful winter wonderland in St. Albert, Alberta. So that's what I'm looking at. I'm sure yours is not quite as white and not quite as much, but how are things nonetheless?
It's not quite as snowy here, but where's the snowman? I want to see the snowman.
Yeah, we did get some snow angels done over the weekend, but we have yet to get out and build a snowman. It's still a little bit too fluffy for that snowman. You have to have that perfect snowman consistency or else it doesn't. But snow angel consistency, it is absolutely perfect for. So I'm the type of person that thinks that, you know what, we know winter is here now. It's here for likely the next 5-6 months. We might as well try to make the best of it. Not to saying I won't be complaining when it gets down to the minus 35, minus 40, minus 50 a little bit, but for right now, I'm going to try to enjoy it as well. And I think that's how you have to get through winter in Canada.
We're allowed to complain. It's a rite of passage, really.
Yes, it is indeed. All right, let's get on to our first story. And this is an interesting story. You and I have talked a lot about how it's great that we can go buy a joint and smoke it at home and nobody's calling the cops, or we can grow our 4 plants indoors in most places and nobody's calling the cops, etc. But the research that is being done and will be done on the plant, I think, is the biggest boom and going to be the greatest thing about legalization. And now we're seeing it around the world, and particularly in the Netherlands with this story.
It's great to see this research. We try and talk about it every week, it feels like, and I love it. In this case, Dutch researchers and a Swiss cannabis company are testing natural alternatives, as they call it, to solving sleep problems. And those natural alternatives, of course, are cannabis. And now trouble sleeping really is an all too common affliction. In this study, the researchers say that it's 30% of people in the Netherlands that are affected. And this new study is expected to glean some insight into the potential benefit of cannabis when it comes to sleep. And, you know, improving the total amount of sleep and sleep quality, it really reduces a long list of health problems. So it's a cornerstone to good health. This is going to be a large, double-blinded, randomized, placebo-controlled crossover study. I just love that description. It shows how thorough they're going to be. And it's going to include more than 300 people in the Netherlands who are using cannabis products made by a Swiss company. And what they're hoping to find out is whether cannabinoids could be a potential solution. These researchers that are attached to the University of Groningen in the Netherlands say that they believe that full spectrum CBD and CBN products can have a calming and sedating effect on the central nervous system. Now, someone who sleeps on average of less than 6 hours per night actually has a 13% higher mortality rate than someone who's sleeping between 7 and 9 hours. And that's because a lack of sleep creates an increased risk for diabetes, obesity, hypertension, coronary heart disease, stroke, mental disorders that include anxiety and depression. So hopeful that cannabis can be a helpful solution to, affording people a good night's sleep.
Well, I will just tell you from my own personal experience, and of course this is anecdotal. I don't have a large research R&D at the Cannabis 101 podcast, but I will tell you that my life dramatically improved when I figured out my sleep, that I had sleep apnea. I purchased a CPAP machine. I used it properly. And then I'm getting this 8 hours of sleep. Like I used to actually, I would be the opposite. I would sleep 12 hours and it would be terrible sleep and I would be sluggish. I got my sleep figured out, and I'm not joking. It is the foundation of my mental health. If I have a bad sleep, it's going to likely lead to a bad day. So I can concur with a whole lot of this study, but I did not realize that a lack of sleep also led to so many other things. So, you know, when people talk about getting your 8 hours, it's not just lip service, right? It actually does improve or, you know, prevent a lot of things with your health.
It really does, and I'm in the same boat. I've suffered off and on with sleep problems, with insomnia in particular. When it comes down to it, there's not only a health case to be made here, but when it comes to research, I mean, those who are funding it and the nations who are providing the platform usually want some kind of an economic case as well. And right here, this actually does afford that. Well, when it comes to proper sleep, that will actually improve a country's GDP. So addressing sleep deprivation with people reduces health and work-related costs dramatically. So we'll see that as well. And not to say that that's, of course, our first concern. My first concern, as well as hopefully most people, is for that of their friends and family and our fellow human beings. When it comes to economic benefit, well, that's just gravy on the mashed potatoes.
Yeah, and that's, you know what that is? That's a way to get corporate to buy into it. Be like, oh, wow,
yeah.
the production is going to increase. Well, they're doing it for one reason, but it's going to lead to, healthier people. And, you know, that's why you see some places that are really forward thinking, you know, have nap areas and things like that for their employees, because the productivity is improved in those situations when you are getting either proper sleep or, you know, taking those power naps. I don't know about you, but power naps, they really are what they are. They give me an absolute boost when I can get them in.
You know, working from home, I have my own napping area, so That's perfect.
That is awesome. So yeah, exactly. We're on the forward curve with that. Okay, so I talked about, you know, sleep being something that I could identify with. This next story is certainly something I think you can identify with, is that, you know, it's not always the easiest thing to do to get medical cannabis. And I really like this story from the OZ, especially when you look at, you know, how legalization came to be. It owes a lot to the medicinal world, doesn't it?
Yeah, it absolutely does. And I've gone through it firsthand. Like you alluded to, medical cannabis is a pain to access. There are people, thankfully, who are making it easier on patients. And I talked to a couple of them, Joel Taylor being one. And he founded a company called Patient Choice. And that basically gives medical cannabis patients the freedom to purchase from a wider range of providers and hopefully creating a more competitively priced environment on one platform. Right now, one of the challenges is that as a medical cannabis patient, you have to pick your LP, and changing that after choosing them is very difficult. You only have access to one type of product. And once you're on your LP's website, there's no competition on there. So that's a challenge. Right now, Patient Choice does have a few different partnerships that they're trying to increase. They've got the Green Organic Dutchman, Tantalus, G-Tech, which produces cannabis out of companies like Black Market. And basically, Joel said that medical cannabis needs to be much more accessible to Canadians. That hopefully his company can provide a little bit of disruption, a little bit of shakeup, so that people see that it doesn't have to be the way that it is. And he says that if it weren't for medical cannabis patients, there would be no recreational market. They really are the trailblazers, and they were a voice shouting in the wilderness when recreational cannabis was only a dream. Another company that I talked to that's trying to fill the gap when it comes to doctors who are very leery with prescribing cannabis is the CEO and founder of a company called the Reformulary Group. Her name is Helen Stevenson, and she's created something called the Cannabis Standard Index. It goes alongside a model that the company created for pharmaceutical drugs called Drug Finder. And what it does is it tries to bring information about different strains, and not just any information, but information that is very scientifically verified and that is also looked at by physicians. So the idea here is that if you show doctors and you show patients that there is scientific backing that certain strains, certain types of cannabis products can help conditions, then they'll be more willing to buy into that. So hats off to any company that's out there that's trying to make access easier and that's trying to help convince doctors that medical cannabis is a thing and it is helping patients.
Yeah, and as you point out in this article, it's the doctors. It's not made easy for the doctors to be involved in this. A lot of times, doctors, they're not going to make a decision until they're told they're allowed to or told to. A lot of them play it right by the book, and I'm not a doctor, so I'm sure there's a lot of reasons, particularly legal, but this hopefully will be changing, and hopefully more open-minded doctors will be looking into this. And it's quite clear. You provide some numbers from a survey in this article, and it's quite clear that Canadians are saying, listen, we need more than what you're giving us, and we don't want that 30% charge up front.
Yeah, 30%, going into the pockets of different companies that are choosing LPs to, supply cannabis. This poll by Research Co. found that the vast majority of medical cannabis patients are feeling like they're taken advantage of. 72% of Canadians, 82% of medical patients agree that physicians who prescribe medical cannabis should give their patients a choice of suppliers and products. And we've seen with all kinds of other industries that when you give people a choice of the product that they're going to consume, to purchase, really to vote with their dollars, it lowers price and it increases quality in so many different ways.
No doubt. All right, so the U.S. election, I think, has come and gone, but I don't know. It was just such a wild week. And if this isn't peak 2020, I don't know what is. But during all of this gong show, the fact that medical and legal and recreational cannabis was the biggest winner, was so overshadowed. Like, when in the past 40 years would so much legalization of cannabis kind of be a blip on the radar? Well, because of what's going on, everything around this. But if you got so caught up in, Biden and Harris and everything that Trump was going on, and you missed the news about cannabis, it was really the big winner on election night.
It's amazing how progressive the U.S. is in certain areas. And yeah, like you said, the big winners on election night in the U.S. were, cannabis, psychedelics, and overall the decriminalization of all drugs, if you could believe that. So New Jersey, let's start there. They're set to become one of the biggest cannabis markets in the U.S. after legalizing recreational weed. And that's with about 65% of New Jersey voters in favor of that constitutional amendment. So that's really going to raise the stakes, according to people who are watching these decisions closely, in the neighboring states like New York and Pennsylvania. Also, Arizona, Montana, South Dakota all approved recreational cannabis in their own referendums. So that makes it now 15 states that are legalized adult recreational use. And in Mississippi, Montana, and South Dakota, they've legalized medical cannabis also. I'd say that the most historic decision of the night has to go to Oregonians. And they passed what is one of the most significant drug policy changes ever in the United States, where voters there approved a ballot initiative to decriminalize possession of all drugs. So what that will do is it will remove criminal penalties for low-level drug possession offenses. That's a first in the U.S., and rather, there will be a $100 fine levied, or the person could be required to complete a health assessment. Also, on election night in Washington, D.C., voters passed Initiative 81, and that decriminalizes a wide range of psychedelic plants, including magic mushrooms. So that measure is going to make the the prosecution of all who use them, basically among the police force there's lowest law enforcement priorities. So some amazing changes happening in the US right now.
It really is. And it's really interesting. I don't know if, this is the cause or it's just coincidence, but I have started receiving a lot more correspondence and people reaching out from the United States. And one person in particular was from Pennsylvania. And I said, hey, just wait, because the dominoes are starting to follow. And I think what you were talking about with New Jersey, now you've got New York knocking on the door and so many close states that are going to be like, oh my goodness, look at the tax money, look at the revenue, look at the jobs that is being created. The dominoes are going to start falling in that particular area. And that is a massive, you get New York, it's huge, man. It's huge if that happens. And that's what I told this person. I said, just be patient because it's going to start happening. Now, it'll be interesting to see what happens, federally when everything gets settled with Biden-Harris and their decriminalization plan and how long after that it leads to legalization. But you can start to seeing everything tipping in the wheel of cannabis, legal cannabis is really starting to turn, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And when you think about decriminalization versus legalization, when you're legalizing, you're creating a form of tax revenue. If you've decriminalized, then really none of that money goes into the different governmental coffers. And coming in from COVID right now, where really economies are suffering so deeply, when you introduce something like a brand new industry that you could tax, a multi-billion-dollar industry that's going to help lift up economies quite a bit. As far as prohibition of alcohol way back in the 30s, the big change there was the Great Depression. Right. And governments realized that they needed another source of revenue. And here we are in a very similar situation right now where you have economies that are really suffering and cannabis is knocking on the door. That's for sure.
Okay, and this last story that we have kind of dovetails on that, and to what we've been talking about a lot is that there are a lot of companies in Canada that are just waiting for the laws to change in a lot of places, and there's the deals are starting to come out, and this is the one we're talking about right now with Afria, and this is a pretty big deal.
It's a cool one. It's interesting to see because it's not only a Canadian company that's moving into the US, but it's also showing a further trend, which is the disruption of drinks, cannabis drinks in particular. Afria believes that Sweetwater Brewing Company is going to be its entry point to the US and the cornerstone of its longer-term strategy in the States. This is an Ontario-based cannabis company, and they announced this acquisition last week. Now, cannabis drinks really are already a big disruptor. We've seen a lot of different studies and white papers and reports, different people saying that these drinks are going to take a chunk of the alcohol market, that they're going to be something that's really an entry point for new cannabis consumers. And Afria here is really tapping into that. This is going to help them establish infrastructure in the U.S., that's as federal legalization is really looming ever closer. And it's going to give them access to Sweetwater's portfolio of beer brands. And that includes its 420 series that really plays into the cannabis branding. They have offerings like Jack Herer Harvest Ale and Trainwreck Hazy Double IPA. I wish that we could see drinks like that in Canada. Right now, the legislation does prevent any crossover between alcohol and cannabis. So generally, companies are a little bit shy of dubbing their drinks ale or IPAs. But I think that will change as things loosen. And this purchase here is worth about $300 million US. It's already been unanimously approved by Afria's board. The deal is expected to close before the end of December 2020, and it's really going to be a game changer. Sweetwater's based in Atlanta, Georgia. They're one of the biggest independent craft brewers in the United States. They have established distribution across 27 states plus Washington, D.C., and their beverages are available in 29,000 off-premises retail locations and more than 10,000 restaurants. That's an extreme access to a market across the U.S. So this will be interesting to see how it plays out and how it increases Afria's footprint in the U.S.
Yeah, this is really interesting because I went on their website and it seems like all of their drinks do have an alcohol percentage. And as you mentioned, the regulations are that you can't combine an alcoholic beverage with cannabis, which I actually think is smart. I hope that we get these types of drinks with non-alcoholic versions that we can combine cannabis into with our country in our country. It's, as you know from looking at the U.S., it's a wild west down there, and you could pretty much, you can get sunglasses and CBD at a mall kiosk as you're walking down to get some new sandals in Vegas. So there's not as much restrictions, obviously, and I think that will change if it ever goes federally. But I'd like to see the taste of these drinks infused with cannabis, not the alcohol portion. Where do you stand on that?
Yeah, I'm the same. I was a little bit confused going on their website, wondering whether or not some of these drinks did have both cannabis and alcohol in them. It seems like the ones like the Jack Harrow drink and the Trainwreck one only had cannabis, and they didn't seem to have an ABV on the can that I could see.
Good.
But their 420 series, which seems to be basically alcohol, but yet appealing in name to the cannabis market, did a little bit. So it's like you said, it is a little bit Wild West when it comes to regulations. Here in Canada, we're a bit more stringent. And like we talked about last week, as the U.S. really marches toward federal legalization or some form of legalization across states, that Canada will have to get more competitive in its regulations to keep up with the U.S.
Yeah, it's like, the whatever meter race you want to pick has started. Canada is like, out by this giant lead, but then all of a sudden America is going to fly by us if we're not careful. And that's going to mean relaxing some of the regulations. And I'm not saying that, we're going to start selling cannabis in a Max convenience store, but it's going to have to be some regulation relaxing of, in order for these companies to be able to compete with, or we're going to lose the competitive advantage that we should have had for 2 years now.
Yeah. I think that one of the big winners when we see federal legalization in the U.S. is actually going to be our friend Seth Rogen, because those houseplant drinks, when they get into the U.S. market, I think they're just going to take off. Yeah. He has such a big fan base there, and Canopy is so well positioned when it comes to its impending deal with Acreage.
All right, David, before I leave you, I want to give you one more look at our winter wonderland that we have here. And because we have such a winter wonderland, I'm hoping you can help me out a little bit.
I'd be happy to. I have these special OZ toques right here.
Beautiful.
It's quite popular among our readers, and I just want to give your listeners a chance to get in on one of those. Every Thursday in November, we are giving away a toque to a reader, to a listener. All you have to do is email us, hello@okanaganz.com. Let us know what you're enjoying right now, what you're smoking, what you're drinking, what kind of chocolate you're eating, whatever. We'd love to hear. So it's hello@okanaganz.com. And we'll put your name in the hat. Every Thursday, we're going to draw it live on Instagram and announce the winner Thursday and Friday in the newsletter.
All right. Well, maybe the next time we chat, there'll be a snowman and some snow angels, and I'll be out there, or somebody will be out there wearing one of those toques, because we're obviously going to need it here in Alberta. So awesome stuff. Thanks so much for joining me. I look forward to, I'm going to try to win one of those toques, that's for sure, so I can get out in the winter wonderland with the OZ. Thanks as always, David.